Gute Woche. So today's shir is dedicated in honor of the yard site of Reb Tuvia Goldzabel. It was my mistake to have made that dedication a couple of weeks ago. And Choleifen, we remember him fondly for his Masim Tovim and how he was Mekarev, many people. And he should be a good Melitz Yosher for his family. B'Tov Hanira v'Hanigla. Motzei Shabbos, I want to start off with a story. The story is the Hemshech, in continuation with how we had discussions a while ago, not so long ago, about Baim Achronim, about the different minhagim, whether to use a generous amount of water or to use just a little bit of water. And I mentioned that al pi Kabbalah, there's the idea that you shouldn't be pouring a lot of water because it's Zechelek Adam Rosha, it goes to the Sitra Achra, etc. So one of our regular listeners, Rav Remy Kivman, who just finished Shiva from his the passing of his father, up in Liverpool. So he sent me a clip of the Rebbe washing Mayim Achronim. And it was, his caption was, a jalavit nishken, a generous amount of water. So this past week, I received in the mail, there's a Ha'oras B'Yurim, which comes out periodically. This is issue number 1191. So 1,100 issues plus have been published in the last 40 odd years. And so they have here an article, two articles written by two Bochrim about Mayim Achronim. And so I was fascinated, and one of them quoted this story. This is a story which was told by one of the Skvera Rebbes, the current Skvera Rebbe in the name of his father, etc. As we know, the Skvera they are Tverskis. The Tverskis, they originate from Reb Nochem Chernobyler. Apparently, I didn't check this out now, but I heard years ago the idea that the Mizritche Magid had said that Moshiach would be descending either from his oldest Talmud, who was the Menachem Chernobyler, or from his youngest Talmud, which was the Balatanya, the Alter Rebbe. And so it worked out that there were several shidduchim between the two families, between the Chernobyl family, which is Trisk, Skver, etc., and the Alter Rebbe's family. So this is this story at the Chassan. This is where it says the story of the Chassan of Rabbi Yankiv Yisrael Cherkas. The Cherkas, he was a son of Reb Motla Chernobyler. Reb Motla was a son of Reb Nochem Chernobyler. Just to get the profile. So the Rabbi Yankiv Yisrael Cherkas, he gets married to the daughter of the Mittler Rebbe. So he becomes a brother-in-law of the Tzemach Tzedek. Both married two sisters. And at the Chassan, it was a very interesting situation because we know there's a very different style between Chabad and the Polish Chassidim, different style. And here by the Chassan, there were obviously many Chassidim from both sides, and so it was an interesting situation. So the Alter Rebbe said, "Mamorech Chassidus kadarg harbe mamorech Chassidus." He said he spoke ba'arichas, and he then turns to his mechuten, to the Motel Chernobyler, that he should also say Torah. The Chernobyler he declined. Elsewhere, this same story comes up in a few places. Elsewhere, it says how the Chernobyler Chassidim, they were very upset in a way. They hear from the Alter Rebbe such a clarity, such clarity, and by them they're just hearing like little bits and pieces, and so they were saying, why are we deprived of such clarity? I call upon him, but there was a different style. So it came at the end of the meal, one of the meals, and so it came to Mayim Achronim. So the Alter Rebbe poured a generous amount of water when he washed his hands, washed his fingers. So the Chernobyler, the Mottel Chernobyler said, "Yukach no me'at mayim, winzig Wasser, me'at mayim, winzig Wasser, a bissel Teire." So he had now the opportunity to kind of comment that a little bit of water, which means a little bit of Torah, Mayim is all Torah. And the Pasuk is telling us it's enough to say Ma'at Mayim, and only a bit of Torah. Well, this is the Pasuk is said by Avraham Avinu when the Malachim came dressed up as Arvim, as Arabs. So Avraham Avinu said, "Yukach no me'at mayim v'rachasur raglechem." Let's bring a bit of water and you wash your feet. So the Chernobyl was saying, "Yukach no me'at mayim," a little bit of water. V'rachasur raglechem. The main thing is raglechem is the regilis, to get to wash, to cleanse one's habits. The midas hativiyas leitovim. People have brought up or acquired not good habits, not good traits. So the main thing is to cleanse these traits. The main thing is, in other words, to have midas tavis. Then it says, "V'shanu tachas eitz." Avraham Avinu had said that the malachim, the visitors, can rest under the tree. So you can read this, "V'shanu tachas eitz." You can rely on the tree. The tree refers to the tzaddik, and so for the elevated avodas, that you rely on the tzaddik. So this is really in encapsulating the Polish Mahalach, that Ma'at Mayim, Torah, you say Bekitzer, and work on the Midas. Chabad, you also allowed to work on the Midas, that's okay. But then Hishanu Tachaseitz, elevated Avedis, that you rely on the tzaddik. He then added, Kol Torah she'eni mamlocha soifa b'teila. Says in Pirkei Avos, if you have labor, which you learn Torah and you don't have malacha with it, labor, so that's not going to last. So the Chernobyl said, malacha, this is the job of a rebbe. Lahalos v'lalos u'letaken nishmoson shelo shoymin es haTorah. When you say Torah, you have to work to elevate the people who are listening to your Torah. If a Rebbe will say Torah and he doesn't work to elevate the people who are listening through his Torah, so for B'Teila it's not going to last. So this was all the Chernobyl kind of defending his position of saying Torah B'Kitzer and rely on the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's job is to say is to inspire briefly and to tend to elevate through his avodah. The Alter Rebbe responded, "Bimkei meseinu tzlichim lozeh v'i efsher acheres." Back in the Lite, the Alter Rebbe is saying, "Bimkei meseinu in the Lite, it's essential that we have to take this approach." We know elsewhere the Alter Rebbe, I think quoted in the Hayom Yom, when he was sent, the Magi told him, you're going to have to put out a big loy. You have to extinguish a big loy, and from the loy, you're going to have to make a yes. So the Alter Rebbe's mission was obviously to the Liter, and that mentality, the approach of saying short Torahs would not succeed. It needed to have arichas abir, and only that way he would be able to penetrate and bring along the people with a Litvische mentality, and that's why he says he has to take this style of saying Torah b'arichas. And then there's another addition to this, that the Alter Rebbe responded to the Remotel Chernobyl, you're saying Torah she'eni mamalocha soifer b'teila lo yalecha amalocha ligmer. It's not, the onus of finishing the job is not on you. So it's a fascinating exchange here, where you're seeing the mahalach of the Polish Gutayidin, of Ma'at Mayim and Hishanu Tachas Eitz, and the mahalach of the Alter Rebbe, and this seems to follow on from pouring this word, I don't know whether it's in Chabad sources. The Alter Rebbe poured on his fingers water b'shefa, and the Alter Rebbe is kind of saying, I will pour and pour, after something will penetrate. It may not, I remember once, I'll just finish off with this and then go on to our next point. the Rebbe told the famous story of when it was Pinchas Koretzer, and he came to the Mizritche Magid. He was a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. He came to the Mizritche Magid, and there was a blättel of Chassidus. There was a page of Chassidus which was rolling around on the floor, and Pinchas Koretzer was very upset. The idea of taking in Yonim of Chassidus and leaving them, kind of spreading them, and they might become disgraced. Let me just digress for a moment. The Reb Nachman Breslev once made the following comment. He was a nephew. He was a great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he was a nephew of Reb Baruchel. Reb Baruchel was a son of Odel, who was the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov. And so Reb Nachman Breslev said the following: when Baal Shem Tov meets Moshiach, and he says, "Ei Mosai ka'osimar," and Moshiach says, when you'll spread your wellspring will be spread out, etc. Is by the Mezeiden gegangen trer. So Mezeide, the Baal Shem Tov, shed tears. He heard that this is what's needed, is the Chashafusa Ma'isech Chutza, so he shed tears. And so Reb Nachman Breslev says, so der Vater Reb Baruch hat Rachmanes gehat auf dem Mezeidens treren. The Vater Baruch took this kind of holding back view of spreading Chassidus because he was sorry for his Zayda's tears. And the Zalman, or however referred to the Alter Rebbe, he realized that the job has to be done, so he took to the job and he started doing it, spreading Chassidus. So let's come back. So how did I get to this? We're talking about. I went from one story to another. So the story of Pinchas Koretzer, and so then the Alter Rebbe and the Pinchas Koretzer was upset to see the page of Chassidus. I don't know what the word of in English is, Tevalgerenzach, but he was upset, and this was how do you say, symbolic of the ideas of Chassidus being spread out there and not necessarily with the full care which they deserve. And there was a whole kitrug, a whole how do you say, stir of trouble. And then the Alter Rebbe came up with the idea of the moshel of the king who has a son who is very, very ill, and he's lost, he's not able to communicate, etc., etc. And the doctors had despaired, and then came along one doctor and said that there's an eventave, Bekeser HaMelech, in the crown of the king, there's a stone. And that stone is the central stone of the whole crown. That stone has got a healing property. And if you'll take that stone and you'll grind it into powder and you'll mix it with water, you might be able to get a drop through the lips, the pursed lips of the Ben HaMelech, and perhaps it will revive him. And then of course the Melech says yes, and he's mevater, he forgoes the beauty of his crown to save the Ben HaMelech. And I remember how the Rebbe said this story. At Gießen und Gießen und Gießen, halavai atropen mit herangehen. He'll pour and pour copiously. If only perhaps a drop will come in. So perhaps this is what the Alter Rebbe takes their view, pouring b'shefa. There might be going the wrong direction, but halavai, something might penetrate. Upon him, that's the story, and perhaps that also explains back to what I mentioned earlier, that Rabbi Akievman shared with me the clip of the Rebbe washing mayim achronim b'shefa. See, here we have this story of the Alter Rebbe washing mayim achronim b'shefa. It doesn't mean, up till the wrist, but he washed his fingers with a generous amount of water. Let's move on. Okay. So I had this shaila this week, a shliach somewhere in Europe. He's one of the few people in his town. There's a Chevre Kadisha there, but he's one of most of the people there are not necessarily Shomer Shabbos, etc. He's one of the only people probably who fasts there. Until now, he's been fasting on Zayin Oder, as let's explain. The Chevre Kadisha are doing a very sacred job, a very sacred Inyan, but they are worried that perhaps they didn't treat the Niftorim with due respect, and therefore there's a Seder There are many communities that the Chever Kadisha have once a year where they fast, they take upon themselves a fast, and then they have a Suda at the end. Which day this fast is, which day the fast is up to different minhagim. So now, till now, they had been fasting on Zion order, and now he heard that in Chabad, he's aware that in Chabad they fasting on the minig of Chabad is to fast on Tezvav Kislev. So he said this year he fasted the Tezvav Kislev. So what should he do about Zion Adar? So this is he's asking the question. So this comes into a question of Hatoras Nedorim. If you Bechlal in Shulchan Aruch, there's a list in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tov Kuf Ayin Tes, I think it is, a whole list of dates called Tanias Tzadikim that people leave nothing to do with Chevra Kedisha. People would fast on those days as an extra fast. So if he still now had the Seder of fasting on Zayin Adar, to stop doing that, he would have to do Hatoras Nedorim. So he could switch, because he has to do Hatoras Nedorim. Then he asks, as you can do Hatoras Nedorim in such a remote place, can he do Hatoras Nedorim over the phone, over Zoom, v'chulu? So I told him, this we discussed not so long ago, that he can do Hatoras Nedorim over Zoom, but the three Dayonim, the best have to be together in one place. And so Baruch Hashem, he sorted that. This I already posted on Thursday. I posted this list of questions. So another shliach in another town in Europe calls me up and he says he's also the Ben Yochid in his town, and he didn't fast Tezvov, and he forgot about fasting on Zayin Adar. This is Thursday night. Should he fast on Zayin Adar? Now, Bichlal, if you fast, you have to be Mekabel Tainus. If it's already a Dober Kavua, perhaps there's room to say without Kabbalas Tainus is also good. But since this year, because Zayin Adar was on a Friday, so the minig of those who are doing Zayin Adar, they fasted already on Thursday, on Vov Adar. So that you can't say he's going along with the tzibur. So I told him that he shouldn't fast on Zayin Adar because he wasn't Mekabel Tanis in any case. I told him, but wait till 2 days before the Chodesh Nisan, because the Chodesh Nisan is also my Semitic Friday, so make it on Thursday, which I think is Chav Zayin or Chav Ches, whatever. That's what I told him. But it was just the tayelis of putting up the list of questions, so then someone else also benefited from it. Another shliach calls me. He's got a situation where a man and a woman got married. Each one had children from a previous marriage. And when they got married, so this woman started lighting candles, the covered for the children of her husband. That marriage unfortunately didn't last. So now she's asking, does she have to keep the number of candles which she lit? So here it's also a question of Hatoras Nedorim, for the simple reason that lighting candles for Shabbos is a Dovar Teiv. And if you light 4 candles, 5 candles, it doesn't matter whether it's for children. Lighting candles for Shabbos is a Dovar Teiv, and therefore if you lit more candles to start cutting down, becomes a question of Hatoras Nedorim. What I would say, anyone who is in this situation of a remarriage and therefore taking on to light extra candles, they should clearly do so bli neder, because you never know what can be in the future. All right, so now I want to read here from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and we have here that about lighting with 2 wicks. That's not necessarily candles. Here it says use 2 wicks, one for Zocher and one for Shomer. You've got the positive side of Shabbos and the negative side of Shabbos. So that's why we have the 2 wicks. As you know, the famous story in the Gemara Shabbos about the one who was running, with the story with Reb Shimon Yochai and his son, and they saw someone running out of Shabbos with 2 Badei Hodos. And he says, why do you need 2? So he says, well, one for Zocher, one for Shomer. And if it's wax candles, so you also like 2 candles. Now, then you have your beautiful vortis from the Rosh. You can add to 2 candles. You can light 3 or 4. because even though the two are corresponding to Zocher and Shomer, it doesn't matter to add to that number. You shouldn't have less, but not more. Now we know when the Rebbe launched the idea that single girls should light candles, he emphasized it shouldn't be two candles. And that was for another reason. He was particularly concerned. Number one, it shouldn't be that the mother feels, how do you say, offended, that the daughter is kind of taking over. She's also lighting two candles. The daughter lights one. Also, the Rebbe was concerned that in the colleges, etc., it shouldn't be that the college students should feel that they're lighting candles in their college or whatever. It's a ganze shleimus. It's a whole shleimus. It should be seen that it's not a shleimus. That was like these two considerations. Kolponim, I want to now address this business of lighting candles according to the number of children in the family. So we have here, this is a sikha of the Rebbe. Where is it? Upon him, it's a sikha of the Rebbe, it's a note of the Rebbe, that there are women who have a minhig to light, they say they're lighting two candles, one for the husband and one for the wife. So we have in the Shulchan section about Zocher and Shomer. And then we have here idea of one for the husband and one for the wife. So Alpinigle, so the idea of it being Isha, the two candles are before Isha or Baila. And then the Rebbe mentions also about the minhag of having more candles, adding one for each child, to bring greater light of mazel for each one of those. At the time, the Rebbe says he doesn't have the time to search in the Sfarim. In the footnote there, where this is taken from, so he gives a reference to the El Yerabbe. So here we have the El Yerabbe. The El Yerabbe is a commentary on the Levush from Rabbi Elia Shapira, and he writes the following. The second line, V'yesh oimrim neged ish v'isha. Now, those who say that the reason for having two candles is corresponding to a husband and wife, a man and a woman, because Neir is gematria 250. Twice Neir is gematria 500. Now, a man has got 248 evorim. The word aver means here, aver by definition is bosa gidin v'atzomes. It's a bone and flesh and sinews. So in the human body, Mishtin Olis goes a whole list. In the human body, there are so many organs called evarim. So the heart and the lungs don't count in this cheshbon. We're talking here about the organs which have evarim, which have bones. So by a man, the body contains 248. By a woman, there are another extra 4, the Gemara in Bechayres, because they have the openings by where a woman gives birth. So then there are extra bones there, and therefore the woman has got 252, and man has got 248. Together X equals 500. That's the cheshbon of two neighbors. So this is where this minhag of having two and corresponding to Isha Bailo, but coming back to the point, my main point which I'm trying to make, that Lepoyol, once you've already started lighting extra candles, so then it becomes like a form of neder, of Haga Toiva, and therefore one shouldn't cut down unless there's good reason, and then it should be with Hatos Netorim. Let me just go to the notes which we have here, they're in chat. Maram Rutenburg states that candles were introduced by the Goinim due to the Karoim, who held that a lit candle was not allowed. Okay? And the brocha to be mechazik the Indian, that's why they had a brocha and hadloka. The two candles should be one in accordance with the brocha, but due to it being lekovid, not for shalom bias, the extra is like that for Chanukah with a shamash. Okay. I'm getting right. Let's move on. Okay. Practical shaila. Someone asked me. I think they were going to install a new kitchen. And they're asking whether you can have a double sink, as you see in the picture, whether that can be one for milchik and one for fleishik. So this comes into a whole lomdus of the concept of cham miktsosei cham kuloi. Metal is a good conductor of heat, And la halacha, we understand that when there's a heat in one part of the metal, it will spread to other parts. It then goes into a whole parasha. Does that mean also that the taste in the which is absorbed in the keli, does that also spread to the whole keli? Very simple. A question. I have a long knife, and I use the far end of the knife. I used it to cut hot meat. So now that becomes flesh. And so hot knife and then hot meat. And then I took that same knife a few minutes later and I cut with the end nearer the handle. I cut through a piece of cheese and everything is hot. So here's the shaila. I understand chamik that the heat spreads along the whole knife, but does the taste of the flesh also spread along the knife to the other end of the knife? Do you say chamik is mispashet hatam bekula or not? And that's really the question which we have over here. You have one sink, you have two sinks, and one is fleshig, one is milchig. Are we concerned that the fleshig taste will travel through the pores in the metal and then will be shared with the food on the other sink? Personally, I don't see it terribly worrying, but I want to follow what is the minig Yisrael, and so I took out a sefer. This is a sefer on kashrus. It's just one like you have Shmir Shabbos Kelchoso. So there's two sforim here. The lower quote is from the Sefer HaKashrus from someone called Rabbi Fuchs. He writes, Ki yorim hasmuchim zelozeh, two things next to one another. So one thing he says, you should have a mechitza to divide between them. And he says also you should have a separate tap for each sink because people handle the taps, etc. He also is worried about the drainage. You shouldn't be having a backup. So he's quite strict about this. And in his footnotes, he refers to a sefer called Kashrus V'Shabbos B'Mitbach HaModerni, which says the following: the one who wants to avoid any concern of Isur should not use a double sink for milk and meat. The fact that even with a mechitza between them, if the two pieces, the two sink bowls, are one piece of metal, and where the heat of one, you got hot water from the boiler, etc., will have an influence on the other bowl, even if it's not yadze ledes. Because if you're using one side, you'll have a hot meat with a fleshik dishes, and so then the other side will become fleshik, according to one opinion. When you are using the other one with milchik, so it's going to be spreading milchik to the other side. So he's taking here a very cautious view, and so here we're talking about lechatchila. Yeah, let's go back. If this fellow is not asking b'diavad, he's talking lechatchila is installing a new sink. So lechatchila avoid shilas and have put in two separate sinks. There shouldn't be one piece of metal, and you avoid shilas. If you start asking b'diavad, we certainly will find many heterim. But the lechatchila, one should have two separate sinks, and that's what I told the person, lemaisa, to have lechatchila two sinks. Okay. Baruch Hashem, this week we had, in our community in Stamford Hill, we had a triple Shalom Zocher. Three Ingelach born on different days. One of them, Baruch Hashem, was born on Thursday. And so the question which arises, what does one do about sliches, etc.? Because Thursday, the bris will be bismanoi, will be Tanis Esther. So what happens then? So here we have a quote from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. If a bris happens on a Tanis Tzibur, afal pishe ein oimrim tachnun, v'loi behurachum b'sheni v'chamishi. We'll skip tachnun and we'll skip behurachum. Mispalalim slicha. So even if one of the Bali Simcha, that was the Avi Haben, or the Moil, or the Sandik, will be in Shul, so then we won't say Tachnu because of the Bali Simcha being present, but Slichas will be said. And also, as you know, in the Slichas, towards the end, by Zchei if I'm not mistaken, it comes up there again, Oshamnu. Normally, we don't say that because we don't say twice Oshamnu in one setting. That's the Mindig al Kabbalah. So therefore, we skip the second Oshamnu because we've said it earlier in Tachnun, before Tachnun. But in this case, where Tachanun has been omitted, so I've never been actually by such a thing. But you have here a seder of saying slichas and including Oshamnu, and not saying Tachanun. The kiven shemanichim mixas sagi. By the fact that you've dropped Tachanun, that's enough. Ve'ein tzorach lahaniach legamri. You don't have to drop totally. So that seems to be a very clear halacha that if there is a bris on a bali bris on a tanis, so then slichus would be said, but the tachanun is not said. Let's move on. So here's the big issue of the Suda for Purim, and a few comments here. First of all, about this business of Paras Mapa Mekadesh, I think it was fairly clear that the Seder of Paras Mapa Mekadesh is normally not advised, unless the shluchim, etc., who see a tremendous, a special toyeles. So, but generally it wouldn't be advised because they are shilas and bal nefesh, etc. Do you have to two things? Do you have to wash until Yadayim, and do you have to? So the recommended route, which is written in Shulchan Aruch in Ramah, is to have the Suda in the morning. B'shachris, that's the lashon of the Ramah in Tofresh Tzadik Hey. To have the Suda b'shachris. So some people have. Here's a note of the Rebbe. It's in Chelik Hey in Igris. It's also in the back of Chelik Yud Aleph in Kudasiches. Is there a chiyuv to eat bread pas at the Purim meal? Refers to the Mogad Avram, who discusses this, and he says the Meruk Tzio, that's Rabbi Yaakov Emden, says you do have to eat bread, and so writes the Munkacher in the Mukhe Erachayim. He gives a reference to Tosfos in Brochus, but the Birkei Yosef, the Chidah, writes you're yotze without lechem, and that's the impression one gets from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, where he says if you forget to say Ya ala nisim, you don't have to repeat benching. Now the rule generally is, if it's a chiyuv to eat a meal and you forgot to mention the inyan of the day, then you have to repeat the benching. And the fact that Alter Rebbe says if you forgot the ala nisim, you don't have to repeat, seems to say that it's not imperative to eat bread. But then, on the other hand, he says in Siman Kuf Peiches, Alter Rebbe says v'samachta v'ein simcha b'lo achilas lechem. Part of the inyan of simcha is eating lechem. So that's one note. And then the Rebbe has another note in the same letter, is a chiyuv to eat flesh, meat, on the Purim meal. So he refers to the Rambam, Keitzad choyva suda zoi, sheyochal bos, as the Rambam says, they have fleshiks. But it's not brought in poskim. And the Munkacher also, in the Mukhe Erachayim, comments on that. So that is a letter the Rebbe wrote in the Tofshin Hey, perhaps. Then we have here on the other left side, we have here a quote by the Kinnos HaShluchos, Tofshin Nun Aleph. And in a passing comment, the Rebbe is talking about the Sudas Purim, and he says about Mishlech Monos, etc., Mishteh, and in note 25, about the Chi of Suda, he gives a reference to the same Shulchan Aruch, and where it says, the Rambam says to eat fleishiks, and he gives the same references. And he also points out how the Rambam, when it comes to Mishlech Monos, he quotes the Lashon of Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam, Shtei Monos Basar. When it comes to the meal, they don't emphasize you have to have Basar. But it comes to Shlach Monos, which seems to be to provide for the meal, is they do mention Basar. So it's not terribly clear. But so there seems to be some room of flexibility on this. So I'm going back to the Nite Gavriel, where he writes mitzvah lechel basar and want to have basar behema, etc. I just wanted to say my own take on this. Because it's Erev Shabbos, and because one can be distracted by everything else, I feel all the more the need to actually give the Purim Suda a bit more attention, a bit more stability, and therefore, even though there may be room to say not mechuyev to wash, but on the contrary, because of the lack of an anchor, all the more perhaps I feel, but that's my inclination to say that Dafka, you should find the time, anchor some time in the day to wash and to have a bit of fleishiks and you should have a shtickle kviyas. That's my feeling about this. Now I want to also add, I saw there's a weekly publication called Farbrengen, and at the back there's a halacha column by shtickle meshpocha by Reb Chaim Hill Raskin, who's the Rav of Anash now in Petach Tikva. So he writes that the Ramo in Shulchan Aruch says you should have the meal on Friday before Chatzos. The Alter Rebbe in Siman Rosh Mem Tes seems to say that you can go until the Shoah Sidis, till the time a half an hour before Mincha Ktana. And he quotes what I'd quoted the Alter Rebbe as saying that it's okay to go up till Shoah Sidis. But then he gives a reference to another article which someone wrote that one should keep to one should keep to before Chatzos rather than going up till Shoah Sidis. And in other words, the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Shabbos, who says up till Shoah Sidis, should not be seen as contradicting the Ramo in Hilchos Purim, who says to before Chatzos. So I just want to share that with you, and therefore, obviously, the Chatchila, one should try to have before Chatzos. If you don't manage, then you have until Shoah Sidis is also okay. Let's go to the few questions over here on the chat. Someone asks about how many an almond should light how many candles. It's really up to him, and whatever however image he lights, it should be but often with a bli neder. Minimum is 2, obviously. Right. Yeah. Where do you start tachnun from? No, so I'm saying here, you don't say if you're having the bris on Tanis Esther, you don't say tachnun, and you start as it says in the slichas from the top of the page. It says you start saying or something, whatever it is where it says in the slichas, in which normally we don't say, but because you're starting azoi without tachnun, so you'll start from the way it's written in the siddur. Rebedlo is asking about Avinu Malkeinu. L'chayre nicht. Yeah. Because that goes along with Tachnun. And we said you miss out a bit. I once had this discussion about there was a bris, not here, the bris was in New York, whether on Rosh Hashanah, do you say Avinu Malkeinu on Rosh Hashanah when there's a bris? And Lepoil, I was wrong, they were right. That you don't say Avinu, according to Aminu, you don't say Avinu Malkeinu. Okay. Let's move on. So now, I'm saying back to the meat. It's to say it's mamish achiyuv, but it seems to be recommended. That definitely seems to be. Right now, I think we mentioned in previous shiurim about having a shared mishloach monos, a couple of people joining in to a shlach monos. So now, let's read it carefully. Can you have a couple of people joining into a shlach monos? So this is again from Nite Gavriel, and there are those who question this because each person is not giving a whole shlach monos. Yesh oimrim, you can have several people can join into one shlach monos, a joint shlach monos. Right. So the first one is from a Sefer Moedei Hashem, which I looked up. It Seems to be one in the Derech HaPilpul. The second psak, which it says it's okay to have a joint shlachmonis, is from a sefer V'alehu lo yibol b'shem Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So when I saw this, I felt reassured. Reb Shlomo Zalman is one of the mamash the G'dolei HaPoskim of our this generation, or the passing generation, and so he took the view that you can have a mishleach monos. What I would say though is that the mishleach monos should be, there should be a shear within it, at least a kazayis for each person who's joining in. So to have 100 people in one small basket of food doesn't make sense. If there's going to be 5 people or whatever, and it's a nice shlachmonis, then I think that would be okay, that it's representative of the other people. Someone asked me, a shliach, he says they want to do a fundraiser, want to make shlachmonis, and in this way, they'll do a fundraiser. And as I said, you can't give her just a little bar of chocolate and a wafer on behalf of 10 people. It doesn't make sense. It has to be a davar nichbid. It has to be respectable. That it should be representative of a group of people. It doesn't have to be a massive hamper, but it has to be something which should be seen as respectable for a group of people. Let's take a look. Someone's pointing out that we'd have to look carefully. Of course, we'll have to look at the Siddurim more carefully before Thursday to make sure we got the right pieces for people to say the slichas properly. Someone else is commenting, when Reb Melech Tzvibel was sitting shiva for his brother in Aseres Meit Tshuva, and he said that Tachnun and Avinu Malkeinu are not connected. Good, say it. Who's saying this? Nicht, aber okay. Let me get right here. What's it say here? Mogen Avram Pesach Shecholim Maaseh. You can make the Sudas Purim until Shah Sidis. Alter Rebbe generally passes like the Mogen Avram. Fine. All right, we'll have to get back to this. Okay, because one kazais is 2 kazais, and it's also 2 kazais. Right. Can husband and wife give together? Al pi roiv, that is what's done, that people give from families, but there should be. It's very interesting the way the comment comes in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. The women shouldn't rely on their husbands for mishleach monos. They should make their own mishleach monos. I find that funny because usually it's the husbands which are relying on the wives to do the mishleach monos. But there is idea that there should be a separate one, that a man should give to a man, and a woman should give to a woman, besides what you give to families, but there should be a specific union of a man giving to a man. Yeah. Let me get right. So now, so next question was, does bagels and a bagel with lox count as 2 monos? And the answer is yes, it counts. There is a discussion. It comes up in Gemara about Shnei Tavshilin. The Moshel, when it comes to Erev Tisha B'Av, by Suda Mafsekes, you only have 1 Tavshil. What about a piece of fish which is fried in egg? Is that counted as 1 food or 2 foods? So it comes up in several places whether a piece of food, fish or bread, which is covered with egg, counts as 1 food or 2 foods. So they bring that question here also in Sharet Tshuva, whether a chal or a fish which is coated with egg would count as 2. But that's if it's just a coating. But you have a sandwich. So what would happen if I take a bagel and I put it in a separate tub? I'd put some salmon and I put some cheese, whatever your minig is, and I'll put them separate. That you understand it's shlech monos. It's 2 monos. Now because I put it together, therefore it becomes only 1. It's 2 monos which have been put together already for kairech. A bit early for kairech, but never mind. Yeah. So yeah, I think that does count. What about, so next question we have, what about a portion of chips, in American called French fries, and a tub of ketchup? So this here is a quote from the Butchocherov. The Butchocherov, he actually was he in a couple of places refers to the Alter Rebbe B'chaim. He says, Nere Yoyer. So he writes, what about sweets? So he says, if you give out sweets to people, how much would you give to a person a sweet? Even this could be a small piece of chocolate, that would be normal to give as a portion. And then he says, Umasha Uchlin lemasik shesias dobor chariv, shiuroi kemoi, sorry, shkmoi hanitan lachshoy kdei lemasik hativ. So you have something, you have a drink of vodka, and you want to have a fabaisen. So how much does it have to be? So he says the amount as you need for fabaisen. If it's, let's say, something like vinegar, which is to give extra flavor for another food, how much you'd have vinegar at a meal. So he seems to be saying quite clearly that, coming back to our question with the ketchup, if it's normal to have ketchup, chips with ketchup, how much is it called a mona of ketchup? How much ketchup would you have at a meal? And that would be called a mona. So he's not insisting on kazais. It says the normal amount of this food which you'd have for a meal. So it probably would vary according to which type of food you're talking about. If it's a food which you have a larger amount, so then you'd have to have at least a kazais. If it's something which seems to be just like an enhancement of another food, so the amount you'd have of the chometz with a meal, that's already considered a mona. It's quite an interesting psak. Let's take a look at our chat over here. What if there's not a kazais of logs? So yeah, well, according to what we're seeing here, according to the Bechotcher, the amount of fish you would have with the bread which you have at a meal, that seems to be already called a mona. That seems to be his position. Yeah. So all right. So now we're going to mamish yedira betachtoinim, sushi, rice, and fish and vegetables. Yeah, it's kanzai. But 2 pieces of sushi is for sure considered 2 monas. Yeah. Yeah. So chips with ketchup, 2 brachas. Oh, thank you for bringing this up. The famous myth of Mayim Shlach Monas having to have 2 brachas. It doesn't. There's no mocker for that in halacha. It can be two foods with the same bracha, just different foods. Let's go back to the next question here. Someone asked me this question about using a soda stream on Shabbos. So I'm just quoting here. I didn't handle the machine. I just looked at the picture, asked a couple of questions, but it does say in Shmiras Shabbos Kilchoso that you are allowed to make soda with a sefer lux, a soda stream on Shabbos, and so there may be at moments that you have to tighten something. You have to tighten the something like a lid or something, make it tight. But that's not a problem because tightening a lid on a bottle, because it's the derech to open and close it. That's the way you use it. Therefore, it doesn't come into a shiloh of boina. And so he says it's okay. I didn't see this now. I saw in another Sefer Orchos Shabbos, he does have a little bit of reservations about this. There's another issue. In Eretz Yisrael, it's very popular to have your own soda stream, and they have these bulbs which are compressed, whatever it is, and this bulb has to be screwed in place in the handle, and then you press it, and then it impregnates the carbonation into the water. So about putting those things in place on Shabbos, which I don't remember exactly the details. But just to put a bottle into this soda stream and to tighten the bottle and to release the carbonation into the water seems to be quite okay. Let's go on to the next question. We have here there's a pond on Clapton Common, and I was asked the following question. There's a little kiosk there, and they sell coffee. And they have there a bottle of Cardassia milk. Is it okay to go and have a coffee over there? And let's say they use disposable cups, so you're not worried about that. It's just the question about the milk. So I spoke to another Rav about this who shared my concerns. when you send meat in the hands of a Yehudi, so the meat has to be with a shteichi shamas. It has to have a double seal. If it is something which is isur drabonon, then it has to have choisim echod. So just to save the effort, I took here from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's also Shulchan Aruch, I think it's in Kufiyot Ches, yain ubosor v'chatichas dag, wine or meat or fish, shein simin, if you entrust it to a goy, tzorich shnei chisamis, yain mevushel, v'chein achoymitz shel yain, v'cholov, milk, pas, or gvino, sagi b'choysem echot. So when it comes to something which is isur rabbanon, at any rate, so one seal is enough. So, but I don't understand. Have here a Yehudi standing behind a counter, and they take up a bottle and they say, "This is Chol of Yisrael," and yeah, the bottle looks okay. But if it's not sealed, so I don't see how it should be okay to trust them that they haven't um, mixed in a different milk there. What's stopping them from putting in different milk? So I'm not happy about it. When there was occasion that I needed to put milk. Some people are in hospital, and there's a fridge in the hospital, and so you put the milk in the. You don't know. Every patient doesn't have their own fridge, so there's a fridge where the patients can put their food. So one way my sons was me'orer. What about so Taka? When we were careful, and we put the milk bottle in the fridge, we put it inside a bag, and we would tie the neck of the bag. Well, that's already considered one chosim. So you had so it should be at least one chosim. When you live in the care of a Yehudi, it has to have at least one chosim. So Rabbi Klein is me'er coming back to the question of the chips and the ketchup. Is it ketchup, not a toffel? Well, you saw that Butchocherov was saying about the chometz which is used for dipping, and he also you wouldn't make a bracha on the chometz, and it still would be okay. So according to him, a slice of fish with a bit of grain would also be considered shteimonis according to the Butchocherov, and it doesn't need a kazayas of fish, and a bit of grain according to him would already be shteimonis. Let's finally, we have our last thing on our list, and that is someone's already asking about planning ahead for Pesach. He's a person who prepares like a calendar with guidance. So, what's the cutoff time? So there's a cutoff time by when we have to stop eating chametz. So this is in Siman Tov Mem Daled in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. Achar shegoma milechel sudas shachris b'Shabbos zeh koydem shoch hamishis. Once you've finished eating, before the fifth hour begins, so that's going to be around 10 o'clock, 10:30, whatever we look in the calendar, we'll work it out. So then you should shake off the tablecloth from the crumbs, and etc. Wiping them. He goes into details what should do. So the question here is, let's say there's a cutoff time is 10:15. Is it okay to stop eating bread by 10:15, but then you'll keep on eating the rest of the food, the potatoes and the meat, etc., the onions and the eggs? You can have all of that. You can have an Erev Pesach. Because our minig is not to have the inyonim which go into the chareses and the morer fashtetzach, the things which are used for karpas. You can have an Erev Pesach. So is it okay to continue the meal and then let's see 11 o'clock to bench that? That's the question. And so the answer is that one should actually bench then. And the reason is, and this you have here a quote from the Sefer Piskei Teshuvos, that your hamoitzi covers your whole meal because it's all toffel to the hamoitzi. So you don't make a brach on the potatoes and on the meat because it's all toffel to it's all subsidiary to the hamoitzi. But once you have stepped away from the hamoitzi, then the hamoitzi is no longer able to cover all the rest of the foods. That's the concern, and that's what he's taking the view over here. And therefore, what I would say is, if you want to stop, if you want to continue eating, perhaps it would be kedai either to finish your meal totally at the cutoff moment, or you bench then, and perhaps a little later you'll come back and continue, or if you dafka want, you can continue, but you'll have to make a new bracha on the foods which you had after then. So it'd be much more straightforward to make sure to finish your meal, as in hamoitzi or other foods. The dessert you can have after that, because on dessert you're making a separate bracha in any case. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you today, and thank you all for joining us. And I wish you all a veilige Woch, especially Purim, and we should be mismach geula de geula amitis v'ashlema. Aidei Moshiach Tzidkeinu. A gute Woche.
Gute Woche.
Good luck.